Compared to other African countries, Kenya has the highest GDP in public holidays. It is good that the government in the new constitution decided to just have the Jamhuri Day done in Nairobi. But other public holidays, it decided to be taken to the counties. The major benefit that the counties get when Madaraka Day and Mashujaa Day are taken to the counties, the major benefit that the counties get is that the infrastructure that is done around the time when a county is having its national day in its county is massive. So we have, I think, 2 days, that is Madaraka Day and Mashujaa Day, taken out to the counties per year, which means out of the 46 counties, it will take us 23 years to cover all the counties. It is now how many years after the new constitution? That is 15 years. So I think we are almost half through. It requires another 12 years, and after 12 years, I think all counties will have been covered. In Kenya, we have 4 public holidays that, in my view, should be collapsed into one. In Tanzania, they have 2 days. They have Sabasaba and they have the Independence Day. Sabasaba commemorates the day when the ruling party was formed. It was formed on 7th July. Tanzania, so many governments have been overthrown. I think the only day, national holiday, is the Independence Day. But I'm sure M7 has sneaked in NRA Day. But you see, NRA Day, as seen of today, is more of the ruling. NRA has ruled Uganda for long, and Tanzania has ruled TANU, and now CCM have ruled Tanzania maybe forever. But when you mention that Sabasaba is Sabasaba is seen more of a national day than even NRA. Should NRA think of having a day in its honor? In Kenya, we have Madaraka Day, which is today. We have Moi Day, which is on 10th October. We have Mashujaa Day, which is 20th of October, and Jamhuri Day. As I've said, Jamhuri Day is done in the capital. And what people may not know is Jamhuri Day, we are celebrating 2 days in one. We are celebrating 2 days in one. First, it is the celebration of Kenya becoming independent. Kenya became an independent state on 12th December 1963, where the Union Jack, that is the British flag, was replaced by the Kenya flag. At that point in time, the head of state was Queen Elizabeth Regina II of England, and the prime minister was Jomo Kenyatta. This was under a Westminster type of government. On exactly the same day, the following year, 12th December 1964, Kenya became a republic. Kenya became a republic with Jomo Kenyatta being both the head of state and head of government. Remember, for 1 year, Jomo Kenyatta was the head of government and the Queen of England was the head of state. On 12th December 1964, Kenyatta became both the head of state and the head of government. Now, by calling the 12th December as Jamhuri Day, it means that we put a lot of emphasis on the country, on the 1964 date. On the 1964 date, we are doing away with the 1963 date. We are forgetting the Independence Day, but concentrating more on the Republic Day. That is why December 12th is not called Uhuru Day or Independence Day, but it is called Jamhuri Day, which means Republican Day, the day Kenya became republic. So we are putting a lot of emphasis on the 1964 date, covering the 1963 date. And then we come to Mashujaa Day. Mashujaa Day, for quite a long time, was called Kenyatta Day. It was called Kenyatta Day for quite a very, very long time. On 20th October 1952, the governor of Kenya declared a state of emergency. This led to the Kapenguria trial and other things in 1952. Among those arrested and taken to Kapenguria was Jomo Kenyatta. But after he took over the leadership of the country, he took over the leadership of the country, the general was praised more than the general was praised for winning the war, as if he won the war without the foot soldiers. This formed the renaming of the day from Kenyatta Day to Mashujaa Day. It reached a stage where they said that Kenyatta is not the only one who fought the war, but they fought a lot. There were so many Mashujaas. The way things were being handled was as though Jomo Kenyatta fought the war single-handedly. That is why we used to even to hear the songs, Kenyatta aliteswa sana hapa kwetu Kenya, wandugu, kumbe mateso yake yatalete uhuru Kenya. The psychology that Kenya was given in the 60s up to the mid-70s was as though Kenyatta aliteswa sana na the results being uhuru Kenya. It is as if every Kenyan was just at home idling or doing his own business, and then Kenyatta fights for the war, and after winning the war, he came and gifted Kenyans with independence. His history repeats itself. History repeats itself. For so many years, you have been hearing people saying that Raila fought for the multi-party, and you are misusing the multi-party that Raila fought for. So that is how it was. That is the basis of the day being renamed from Kenyatta Day to Mashujaa Day. When Moi took over, there was a school of thought that since the first president had a day named after him, then the second president had to also to have a day named after him. So it was decided that we have a Moi Day. Now the question was, there was a debate on, in those days, talking anything about anything that can be remotely be taken that you are against Moi, that was a treasonable offense. I remember even one time somebody complained that every town has a street called Moi Avenue, Moi Avenue. So he said, why don't we have Moi Street in one town, Moi Road in another town, Moi Highway in another. Every town had Moi Avenue. I was ordered to go and find that person and detain him. Of course, since I was the only person who knew that person who he was, I made just a decision to say that he had already run out. And you know, it was in Mandera. Was it Mandera or Wajir? One of the two. Uh, roadblocks were placed, and the name that had given every roadblock they were looking for a citizen with such a name. But the name had given was an assumed name. That time I had decided. Okay, in fact, most of my IRs, most of my reports, when I saw that they were sensitive, if I saw it was coming from Maluhi, I would say he's a Luo and give him a Luo name, such that if there is such a roadblock, look at it this way. This is somebody who was a Boran, and I said he was a Somali, and I gave a different name and whatever. So all the roadblocks they were looking for a Somali with a name, but he was a Boran. I think you understand. So when it was decided that they look for a day of Moi Day, nobody could. You could not say that. Like now we have 5 presidents, isn't it? Now, if each president is given a day, we would be having 5 different days plus 3, plus Madaraka Day, plus there is plus Madaraka Day. Then there is the Jamhuri Day. So you could see we could even end up with the 10 presidents and having every month you have a day named after a president. But those days you could not argue that way. So the only thing you could argue that time was which day. The decision to have Moi Day was already made, and the decision of which day, now the debate was to be on which day Moi was to be there. Uh, the person who came up with the idea, that we should have Moi Day was none. Oh, okay. I'm mixing my mind, but let me correct myself. On 10th October, on 10th October 1978, when Moi was the acting president, that is the day when Sharif Nasir suggested that Moi should be elected as the president unopposed. So that was 1978. So 12 years later, in 1990, when people are now trying to decide whether we should have a Moi Day, people now came. That is where now my confusion was. Now, on 10th October 1978 is when Sharif Nasir was the first person to go public by saying Moi should go unopposed. So in 1990, people settled on 10th October as Moi Day, because that is the day that that 12 years back, Sharif Nasir had suggested that Moi should be elected unopposed. But then some people felt that having 2 public holidays 10 days apart was very taxing, especially on the president. How do you make a national speech on 10th, and then 10 days later you make another national speech? It was too near. But it was a bit of a challenge because it would be interpreted as if you are opposing the president. That is why 10th October was chosen as Moi's Day. Remember, though, this was within the 90 days, that is 3 months of him acting as the president. Jomo Kenyatta died in August. So October 10th, that was within the 90 days when Moi was still the acting president. Now, for those of you who may want to know, who may be asking themselves, what is the difference between acting president and the substantive president? The acting president has his power limited, and that is why recently we had a case where the deputy chief justice, had constituted a bench to hear a case, and the Court of Appeal decided that some powers, first of all, the position of acting Chief Justice only occurs when the Chief Justice has vacated the office, and the process of electing another Chief Justice is on the way. So the Deputy Chief Justice becomes the acting Chief Justice. But then we were even told that even in such a situation, the acting Chief Justice has some limited powers to do. Like the acting president has limited powers. He cannot call a press conference. He cannot, not a press conference. He cannot call a war. He cannot declare a war. He cannot fire or hire a minister. He could only hire or fire a minister if the whole cabinet agreed. And then there was also the security of tenure. You see, if you are the acting president, it is only 90 days. But being the president, you have a 5. So you understand why the Moi had to be elected and not to go through as acting president. So it was on 10th October 1978 that Sharif Nasir suggested that Moi be elected and opposed. Through pushing and pulling, with the intention of delaying Moi Day, there came a confusion of the functions of Moi Day. Remember, we have this pushing and pulling is, we tried to delete the Moi Day as a public holiday, but we came later to understand that when Moi was still the president, he had engraved it into the constitution. So it is impossible to delete the day until we have to, it has a higher, what do you call, it has a higher status, so we cannot just delete it or do it away with it just sifuawakanili. So there was now the pushing of, now we have a holiday that day, yeah, but what do we do with the holiday? And again, we started having a confusion of what day to do with it. Moi himself said that he would have wanted the day to be set aside to remember other Kenyans. So we started, there was a question of, do we call it Utamaduni Day or do we call it Huduma Day? There was that confusion. Utamaduni Day is the day set aside for our traditions, our culture and traditions. And Huduma is service to mankind. Now the question was, how do we rename the Moi Day? And remember that Sebston Moses Budamba Mudavadi had set the 26th day of December, the day that is called Boxing Day, as the Maragoli traditional day. So the government has set aside those days, that since you see, we don't we just adapted the 26th December just that way, because we know Christmas what it stands for. But then Boxing Day in other cultures is the day when people open their boxes, Christmas boxes, to see what they have been gifted. But Kenya, we don't have that culture. So that is when we took up the Mudavadi Maragoli Tradition Day and made it a national tradition day. We made it a national tradition day, so that on 26th, which has always forever been a free day, has now become the Utamaduni Day. But Moi Day has now been, that is 10th October, has been said as Huduma Day. This is a day that you set aside and remember the less privileged people. And that is how the confusion of the 2 days was settled. Now, well, let us come back to Madaraka Day. We commemorate Madaraka Day on because of the 1st June 1963. On this day, Jomo Kenyatta was sworn in as the Prime Minister of the Colony and Protectorate of Kenya. The head of state was the Queen of England, represented by the governor. Remember the name governor. She was represented by the governor. Madaraka in Kiswahili is a Kiswahili word which has two meanings: responsibilities and promotion. In this case, Kenyans were celebrating responsibility. It means that the Prime Minister, Jomo Kenyatta, was becoming a responsible Prime Minister. I would want to say that before him we had a Chief Minister, but the Chief Minister was just like today's Chief Cabinet Secretary. The position of Prime Minister in Kenya has had 5 transformations, which we will come to it later. Now, Kenya was a colony and protectorate for slightly over 6 months. That is between 1st June 1963 and 12th December 1963. Kenya was a colony and protectorate. And why is it that other countries were either a colony or a protectorate, yet Kenya was both? There was the 10-mile coastal strip, which belonged to the Sultan of Zanzibar, but was ruled by Kenya. So it was a protectorate. The protectorate was the 10-mile strip, coastal strip, but the rest of Kenya was a colony. So both coastal strip protectorate and the colony of Kenya was ruled from Nairobi. So the whole country was known as Colony and Protectorate of Kenya. So for a period of slightly over 6 months, Kenya was a colony and a protectorate with a governor representing the Queen and Jomo Kenyatta, the Prime Minister. Then on 12th December 1963, Kenya became an independent state. Remember, I'm not talking of a republic. Kenya became an independent state with the Queen of England as the head of state and Jomo Kenyatta as the Prime Minister in the Westminster Constitution. Among my very first video uploads on this channel, I had talked of various constitutions in the world. So you are free to go and check on the Westminster Constitution. Kenya was between December 12, 1963 and December 12, 1964, exactly 1 year. Kenya was a state and not a republic. It was a state with the Queen of England being the head of state. Now, Kenya was a state, just like Jamaica, New Zealand, Canada, and Australia. So in Kenya, in that exactly 1 year period, the Queen of England was the head of state of Kenya, represented by, remember, all those years, the person who used to represent the Queen was the governor. But for 1 year, for 12 months, for 365 days, the governor's title changed to Governor General. He became Governor General. You may ask, what is the difference between Governor General and Governor? This is very important. And it would even lead some to go to the pay bill. The governor of the colony and state of Kenya was representing the Queen, and he was answerable to the Secretary of State in charge of colonies. Even when the state of emergency was declared, the governor had to consult the Secretary of State for colonies and Commonwealth. But now he is the Governor General, meaning just like the Governor General in Canada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Australia, and so on. The Governor General reports directly to Birmingham. So the Governor General was reporting directly to the Queen, just like the Governor General in Canada, Jamaica, New Zealand, and Australia. They reported directly to King Charles. Now you know. That is how Kenya was for the 12 years. When King Charles visits Canada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Australia, etc., and other states, his vehicle doesn't don the Union Jack. It dons the flag of that country. Because when he's in Canada, for example, I think he's still in Canada now. There's a time he went to Canada recently, and I think he is still there. When he goes around in Canada, if King Charles comes to a country like Kenya, his vehicle dons the UK flag. But when he goes to Canada, he does not put on the UK flag. His car has the Canadian flag because he is the head of state of Canada. His title of his mother's title in Kenya in that time, his title now in those countries I've mentioned is that he is called King Charles, the head of state of Canada. In Britain, they say King Charles, the king of United Kingdom, isn't it? But in Canada, he is called King Charles, head of state of Canada. So that time, the Queen was head of state of the state of Kenya. Now, imagine when King Charles, as the head of state of Canada, is being introduced to ambassadors and high commissioners to Canada. It reaches a time that he is introduced to the High Commissioner of Britain to Canada. It's a bit confusing, but if you take a lot of interest and time to replay this video several times, you will understand. On 12th December 1964, Kenya became independent republic. Kenya, from being an independent state, it became an independent republic. So Jomo Kenyatta was now both the head of state and head of government. He had to move to Government House. And since, he had to move to Government House, which was renamed State House up to today. You remember that before 12th December 1964, for 1 year, 12 months, 365 days, that is from 12 December 1963 to 12 December 1964, Kenya was a state and Jomo Kenyatta was the prime minister using the Westminster Constitution. So Jomo Kenyatta had to find an office. Where did he have to find the office? He had to find an office somewhere in town. So they went to the Public Works Department headquarters. Public Works Department after independence was renamed Ministry of Works. So he went to the Ministry of Works or headquarters in the capital, in the CBD, and occupied that. That became the office of the prime minister. It became the office of the prime minister. And the public works department, or the ministry of works, the ministry of works had to move to community area, Upper Hill community area. If you look properly at the Ministry of Works headquarters and you look at the office of the president, they look alike. So when the ministry was given to the prime minister and they were given money to construct another headquarters, they went to community area and built another office. That is why they resemble each other. You can go there and see. Now in 1964, Jomo Kenyatta became both the head of state and head of government. When he became both the head of state and head of the government, the governor general had to move out of government house. He had to move out of government house and give it to the to the president. And the president had to rename it as the president had to rename it as State House. The deputy governor used to reside in Kibra. The deputy governor used to reside in Kibra, and that is why, that is the, not why, that is the house that Jomo Kenyatta gifted Daniel Arap Moi. Because after independence, that house became the residence of the vice president. Raila grew up in that house, and Oburu. When Jaramogi handed over to who? To Joseph Murumbi, Joseph Murumbi refused to stay in that house. Joseph Murumbi refused to stay in that house, and it stayed unoccupied for the duration of Joseph Murumbi. When Moi used to live in Nakuru, the place is now called Moi Flats, or is it Moi Estate or Moi Flats? They're next to each other, but he used to stay there. He was sworn in as the vice president in the morning. By evening, he had moved over to Kibera. Jomo Kenyatta was impressed, and Jomo Kenyatta decided that the house belongs to Moi as a personal house. Of course, when Moi became the president, he occupied that house, and later on, it was decided that instead of building houses the way they built for Vice President Wamalwa Kijana, they decided to go to a military base and build a house for the DP, the Hustlers Mansion there. Why was it built in a military place? It's because in America, the vice president stays within the Pentagon, the military place. So that is how it is. I know why you must be wondering why the president has two offices. Now, him as the head of state stayed in State House, and him as the head of government occupied the prime minister's office at Harambee House. That is why he has two houses. He had two offices up to today. It is because State House is his house, just State House is his office as the head of state, and Harambee House is his office as head of government. As I said in this recording, that the position of prime minister has been occupied by four different people with 5 different job descriptions. Alafu nisikie mwingine akisema what is in a name. We are going to look at the 4 people who occupied it and their 4 different job descriptions or job mandates. The 4 were Ronald Gideon Ngala. I know many people will be shocked. The second one was Jomo Kenyatta. The third one was Raila Amolo Odinga. And the last one is Musalia Mudavadi. They are four, but they have 5 different job descriptions, which we are going to look at. Before independence, just before independence, there was a general elections. There was a general election, and KANU won the majority. It was asked to form a government. It was formed to form a government. Those who were there never passed information the way I am doing. Sorry to say, but it is true that I have played my part. I have explained to Kenyans, younger Kenyans, about Kenya during my time. It will forever be there. But those who were there never passed the information, so it is a bit confusing. The British never at all trusted Jaramogi Oginga, yet they asked him to form a government. If we would have had somebody at that time who could explain things to us, we could understand. But then the British asked him to form a government, and at that time the head of KANU in an acting capacity was James Gichuru. Yet they asked Jaramogi to form the government. Why didn't they ask James Gichuru to form a government? It is the problem of those who were there during that time who died with that information. Thank God I will die one day, but my information will not die with me. So yes, it happened. You can even there is even on YouTube there is a picture of Jaramogi in black and white arguing how we can go ahead when our leader and teacher is there. So we'll take it as that. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Can I call him by his full names? He was Jaramogi Abednego Adonija Oginga Odinga. He was taken by a chopper to Kahawa Garrison and asked by Brigadier Hadi to form a government, and he refused, citing what I've just said above. So Kadu was asked to form a minority government. Kadu was asked, yeah. So Kadu was asked to form a minority government. We will now understand what a minority government is. I know people will start wondering why call it a minority government. Yet we know that once a general election is held, the party with the majority is asked to form a majority government. Let me try to explain. I've never been to a law school, but our law instructor in Kiganjo was none other than Nyaseda. And Nyaseda used to say that he's the best law teacher outside the law school. Looking at myself and looking at my classmates, Special Inspectorate Course number 2 of 1988, I can tell you without doubt that yes, Nyaseda was boasting, but he was telling the truth. He is the best law teacher, law and constitutional teacher outside a law school. Now let us understand what a minority government is. After a general election, the party or coalition with 50 plus 1 MPs is asked by the head of state to form a government if the constitution is the Westminster style. Now, the party with 50 plus 1 or a coalition with 50 plus 1, it forms what we call a majority government. And its leader becomes the prime minister and head of government. Now, here the head of state is ceremonial and head of government is the executive. But if the party or coalition with the majority MPs refuse or is unable to form a government, the head of state has two options. The head of state has two options. He can call a fresh general election. That is over 90% of the occasions, the head of state calls for a fresh general election, immediate. Or the head of state can call upon the next largest party or coalition to form a minority government. This happens, but it is very, very rare. So a minority government means that they are in the government, but they cannot raise 50 plus 1 MPs. So KADU, Kenya African Democratic Union, with its minority, formed a government with Ronald Gideon Ngala as the chief minister. Now, if I have to talk about the chief minister, if my estimation is right, I think the chief minister, he's more or less like today's chief cabinet secretary. Although the chief cabinet minister, no, the chief minister is the one who nominates. The chief minister is more closer to a prime minister, because he or she nominates cabinet ministers who have to be approved by the parliament and sworn in by the head of state. So the first person was Chief Minister Ronald Gala, but he was almost more like what Mudavadi is today, which is a cabinet minister who is the first among equals. In 1963 general elections, KANU had the majority and it formed a majority government, meaning that KANU had more than half of the MPs plus one. At least it formed that. And Jomo Kenyatta was made the prime minister, not the chief minister, but prime minister. He was made a prime minister because he had powers just like the prime minister in our Westminster democracy. Hence the name Madaraka. It means that he had Madaraka, he had powers. Ronald Ngala, as I've said, was more of a senior, of the senior among equals. Between first Madaraka Day, that is between 1st June 1963 and 12th December 1964, a period of 1.5 years, Jomo was the purest Westminster Prime Minister Kenya has ever had to date. So Ngala was just a senior minister. Jomo Kenyatta was a prime minister twice. He was the prime minister in the colony of Kenya, and he was also the prime minister in the state of Kenya. Colony and protectorate of Kenya, that was from 1st June 1963 to 12th December 1963, he was the prime minister in a colony of Kenya. But from 1960, for 1 year, 365 days, he was the prime minister and head of government in the state of Kenya. But in 1964, 12th December, Jomo Kenyatta became both the head of state, occupying State House, and head of government, occupying Harambee House. In the year 2007, Kriegler, an independent external judge, declared that there is no way of knowing who won the 2007 election. So when you hear Raila say Kibaki stole his election, we go by the independent outside arbitrator who said that both sides stole the election, that it is impossible or too hard to determine who won the election. And you see, Kibaki had been sworn in already as the president. So Raila could not be sworn in as the president. Kibaki was sworn in for 5 years. So during that 5 years, Raila could not be a co-president. In some countries, they have a provision for co-presidency. For people in East Africa, and especially people in Uganda, you remember after Binaisa was removed and Mukasa was the prime minister, there was a three-man presidency. There were three people, three men who acted as the president. So long as they signed, and whenever the prime minister would do anything, these three men would sign in the place of the presidency. Well, in reality, those were stooges for Mutesa, for not Mwanga, for Mwanga, the prime minister. That is a story for another day. So there is the head of state. Since Raila could not be a co-president with Kibaki, and Kibaki could not be removed, or they would not even call for another election until 5 years was there was option number two. Option number two was for Kibaki and for Raila to replace Kalonzo Musyoka as the vice president. This was impossible for two reasons. One, okay, the constitution then said that Kibaki would just sack Kalonzo Musyoka without explaining, without anything. That was how the constitution then was. We can see that Rigathi had to be impeached. That is the constitution now. But there are two reasons why it was impossible for Raila to be Kibaki's vice president. Because, first of all, it would mean that Raila was agreeing that he did not win the election. It meant that he did not win the election. And the other thing was Raila was accepting to be junior to Kibaki. Of course, Kofi Annan and other constitutional experts wanted Raila to be as much as possible to be the co-head of state. But the constitution of Kenya did not allow for the co-head of state. So Raila had no option than to disown the head of state. In the Kenya constitution then, and even now, there can only be one head of state at a go, who would be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and would have his or her presidential standards. It was impossible for that to be done for Raila. So there was the next best thing. The next best thing was for Raila to be the core head of state. Not head of state. Let me correct myself. It was for Raila to be the core head of government. Head of state, commander-in-chief, and the having a presidential standard flag, that is, was only for Kibaki. But in short, I'm saying that State House was fully for Kibaki, but Harambee House was to be split into two. There were to be two core heads of government. The intention then, but the realities came to be out. Okay, we'll talk about that. But the intention then was that Kibaki was to be the single head of state. But head of state or head of government, Raila and Kibaki had to have 50-50. Nusu nusu. That is why you hear of nusu mkate. Nusu nusu. And also there was also nusu mkate also came when Raila, in a certain meeting, he complained that he was given nusu mkeka, old and torn mkeka, mat. But let us not talk about that. Is a sideshow. The constitution then was that Raila and Kibaki were to be the core heads of government, 50% share, 50% share. But as things went on, and then there was the question: Raila has 50% share as head of government, isn't it? What would be his title? Since he could not be called president, he could not be called vice president. Then there was a slight constitution change which was to accommodate him as prime minister. Remember, the 5 years they used to have problems because Kibaki said he could not make Raila prime minister because there was nowhere in the constitution that it was written. So this time now, the constitution was made to allow for the office of the prime minister, who would be a co-head of state. No, I'm keeping on, but let me repeat myself. He would be a co-head of government. The head of state would be Kibaki alone, but the government would be co-run by two people. That is both Kibaki and Raila. That is how he became the prime minister. But when you look at his prime ministership, it started, it got eroded as time went on. It got eroded as time went on, such that by election time, he was less powerful than even a chief cabinet minister today. Whenever people, no, okay, that is the last sentence I would say as I finish. So you'll see that Musalia Mudavadi, who came after Raila, is just like a colonial chief minister, one among others. But the colonial chief minister, that is Ronald Gideon Ngala, was did not have a portfolio, and Mudavadi has a portfolio. It keeps on changing, but currently is the cabinet secretary for foreign affairs. So we have had, you can see, we have had 5 times. The first time is Chief Minister Ronald Gideon Ngala, Chief Minister in the colony. Then we have the Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta in the colony, shortly for 6 months. Then Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta, the third one is Prime Minister Jomo Kenyatta 2 in the state of Kenya. Then we have Raila, now the fourth time. The first time is Ronald Ngala. The second time is Prime Minister Jomo 1. The third one is Prime Minister Jomo 2. The fourth one is Raila co-head of government. And lastly, Musalia Mudavadi as the chief cabinet minister in the fifth government. Yeah, he's the fifth such right honorable in the fifth government. As I pen off, I would want to say that whenever people say that I have a very good teaching capacity, I remember my father, Lando. He must be smiling in his grave. We really had a fight with him. He really fought for me to become a teacher, and I really fought to become a cop. Dad, I know you are smiling when people say that your son is the second best history teacher in Kenya's history after Professor Ogot. But my viewer, do you know something we share with Ogot? Personally, I never studied history. The last history I did was in primary. Secondary, I went to technical high school where I studied metalwork. And in A level, from 5 and 6, I studied grammar, MG Econ. The first degree that Professor got was a degree, I can't remember, but it was not in history. But later on, Professor Ogot proved to be the best history teacher Kenya has ever produced. Well, I'm not sure whether I'm the distant second, but even if I'm the 99th, but I have to honor my father, the late Japheth Lando Kwatenge. The late Japheth Lando. Kwatenge was his father. He honored me. Out of all his sons, he honored me as to give I'm not his eldest son, but he honored me by giving me his father's name. People say I resemble him most, and I honor him. Whenever anybody says I'm a very good history teacher, I honor and respect my father.